Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Hi. Okay, so we have two really special guests today, but I just wanted to say hi to chat quickly because I was quite surprised. There were already quite a lot of people greeting in here. So I just wanted to say hi to everyone. Hi, Busby and Katrina, Caddy, True Crime Pantomime. Thank you so much for joining today. Welcome to my very first live. All right. So like I said, we have two really special guests today, and a lot of you guys do know who Andrew is because he's a friend of the channel. But hello to attorney Andrew Myers, and some of you will also know Mizzy. Mizzy is an activist on the Sandra Birchmore case. So we wanted to just do a live today and kind of get, people a little bit more familiar with this case and kind of the journey that especially Mizzy has gone through. Leading to this point, there's been a lot of developments lately. I think you said 2 weeks ago, right,
Yeah.
Mizzy?
2 weeks ago, Wednesday.
Yeah. So, wait. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I wonder, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you got involved with this case? A little bit of your background in terms of this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me back on your channel. I'm local, so I saw it on the news and when the internal report dropped, and I was shocked that 3 officers were being accused of, grooming a young woman, and there was abuse, sexual abuse, and it led up to her supposed suicide. And I just had a feeling in my gut from the second I saw that she didn't do this to herself. So I looked into the case, but I'm also a content creator. So I was kind of busy with another case, but I would come back. I would, when I went to bed at night, I would think about Sandra. I would Google to see if I was shocked that nothing was happening in this case. And this went on for a few months. And then my friend Sarah, whose son Brandon Embry was murdered, the first case I ever covered, messaged me and said, "What's up with that Sandra Birchmore case?" And I was like, "What? How do you know about this case?" Because she lives in North Carolina, and this took place in Massachusetts, and people around Massachusetts didn't know about Sandra's case because it just was like a blip on the radar, and it just went away. And so her and I started digging into the case for a few weeks, and we were getting more disturbed as it went on. And I was reading the report and I was clipping things to her saying, there's some really, really crazy things going on. And we were thinking some of it looked like trafficking of her. And so she said, "You know what, I got to get back to Brandon's case, but will you do a Facebook group and I'll do a petition?" Because the petition's really easy to run. And a Facebook group is more, you have to be more dedicated to it. And I said, and I just thought for one split second, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then that's how it started. When we were thinking about doing it, I reached out to like every person that I could reach on Sandra's list because her Facebook page was kind of locked to me, but you could see some of her pictures. So I went through and messaged everybody. And the only person that got back to me was her cousin Barb. So Barb has been like my silent partner in this, in this venture. And we just started pushing her story out there. It was felt like we were clawing to get people on the page at the beginning. I made like friends and family come follow this page just so it looked like we had some followers. But slowly people started trickling in. And then with the Karen Reed case starting to really pick up in Massachusetts, because when we started ramping up our page, it was exactly like we were almost in lockstep with Karen Reed. As she got bigger, we got bigger. And I was able to I like to describe it as I was able to grab onto her skirt as she was being shot out of the cannon and hold on for dear life and be like, hey guys, there's another case that is kind of, has connective tissue. It's same investigators. It's just as crazy, and we slowly build and build and build. And then now we're up to over 14,000 members now on her page.
That's amazing. Yeah, because Andrew and I, we've covered the case a little bit together as well. But we were just talking about how surprising it is, that, now people do kind of know about it because of the developments, which, we'll get into. But it feels like the case was really just like swept under the rug for so long, especially alongside, the Karen Reed case. And I don't know. I think also it's important to note that I think Sandra's case is kind of almost twofold in the sense that there's two investigations that have worked alongside one another. So just for people who don't know, one of the investigations was about a police explorers program that Sandra was a part of as a young girl. And there was an investigation into police misconduct in that program. And that kind of worked alongside the investigation into Sandra Birchmore's murder, which was initially ruled a suicide. And it's only just recently come out that that is most likely not the case. So I don't know if it maybe was to do with that kind of complexity that this case was not as popular as it should have been in true crime until now. Do you think?
I think partly is because her death was ruled a suicide so quickly. Like it was like before the ME even was able to look at her, they were saying it was a suicide. And it's like the Stoughton police took over the internal investigation, but there's a lot of issues with the Massachusetts State Police investigation and Michael Morrissey's office because, I know we'll get more deep into the FBI's portion, but they had all this information that the FBI has. The only thing they really didn't have is a medical examiner saying it was a murder or a homicide. But I wonder with that too, because if you watch the Karen Reed case, when one of the state troopers was on the stand, they were talking about joking back and forth through text about putting pressure on the medical examiner to rule John's death a homicide instead of a undetermined. So were they doing the same thing in Sandra's case? Did they basically put pressure on the medical examiner? That's one of the questions I have, because not just Dr. Bodden has come forward saying, he looked at it for the family, but the FBI got their own pathologist. And so that's two world-renowned pathologists to look at Sandra's case saying, no, this wasn't a suicide, this was a homicide. So what went on between the Massachusetts State Police and the medical examiner, or was it just the medical examiner not doing her job properly?
Yeah, there's really a question as to whether it was incompetence or corruption or a combination of both. But just the fact that, the medical examiner initially, said that it was a suicide, and then so many years went by. So how is it that it took so many years for the FBI to get involved. And I mean, you know, I'm a newsie. Before I went to law school, I was a reporter. I worked in the TV business. I reported on crime and everything else. And I'm embarrassed to say that I never, you know, as somebody that watches and reads the news I never heard of this case until during the Karen Reed trial, which I watched all of it, not live, sometimes live, but because of my work, I would go home and watch it on YouTube that night. So I watched pretty much all of the Karen Reed trial. And then I started hearing about this case. So I'm embarrassed to say that as somebody that's paid attention, I didn't hear about it. And if I didn't hear about it, I'm telling you that a lot of people in Massachusetts didn't hear about it. So it was definitely swept under the rug. And again, your question is good. Was it just incompetence, or was it corruption, or both?
And I lean towards the corruption, because I specifically spoke to Lieutenant Fanning last year in the fall, and he lied to me repeatedly. One of the biggest lies, I feel, besides the trust me, I know what a suicide looks like, besides him saying that, he told me that he was very careful in his text messages. He didn't incriminate himself much in his text messages.
That's a lie.
I see the text messages from on her devices, and I didn't necessarily believe him, but I was like, maybe he didn't. Maybe he was, maybe he was using a burner phone. Maybe, I was like saying these maybes. But after seeing these text messages, there is no way that the Massachusetts State Police can look at somebody in the face. Well, they didn't look me. I was speaking on the phone, and lied to them. But they looked the family in the face and lied to them. You looked this family in the face and told them their loved one killed herself when this man set her up for her own murder. And the Massachusetts State Police left this man on the streets, this monster. If people haven't read that affidavit, go read it. He is a monster. Like, they left this man on the streets. Who else did he hurt while in the 3.5 period that he's had on the streets?
You know what really strikes me is that the affidavit you speak about, yes, it was really well written, but it was an affidavit that was attached to a motion for detention, and the hearing was on the schedule for September 10th, and Farwell waived it. He waived the argument. Does that tell you something about how, I don't know, how embarrassing it will be? If I don't think a lot of people read it. It's 63, 67 pages long. And I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people have read it, even though it's publicly available. So he waived his hearing because he didn't want that stuff getting out in the news.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how many people in chat have read it or are familiar with it, but it does detail a lot of text messages, which is why I was so surprised to hear you say that comment about him being careful. Because, I mean, if you look at the content of that motion, it's anything but careful. It's some of the most disturbing stuff I've ever actually read between two people. And I think that is also maybe part of what has really captured people when it comes to this case now, that people are suddenly so interested, because it's really shocking. Far from careful. I was really surprised to hear that, Mizzy.
Yeah. And people need to remember, he was a police officer. He had power over her and all of us, anybody who lived in that community. And I can only imagine what the other two were saying to her through text. One wasn't texting her, as far as I know. He was messaging her on Facebook Messenger under the name Marty Riggs from the Lethal Weapon movies, which is a crazy cop. So that tells you, if that tells you anything, that's his secret name. But
very perfect.
It's just it's for them to say that he was careful is just so bad. And one of the other things he said to me, I kept coming back and saying, I think she was murdered. And he kept saying, oh, trust me. And he said, I said, well, he was a detective. He would have known how to set up a crime scene. And he said to me, oh, he wasn't a real detective. He was just like, a Stoughton detective, kind of like poo-pooing that, oh, he doesn't know anything. He's like, he doesn't deal with the murders. We do the murders. And I was just like, come on. Stoughton police would be the first on this scene if a murder takes place in Stoughton. And they're the ones who go to the scene and turn it over to Massachusetts State Police.
Right.
Yeah. So
exactly. Yeah.
And there's even something in the messages about it.
Yeah. This officer Fanning, Trooper Fanning that I spoke to, he shouldn't have ever been on Sanders' case anyway. He used to be a Stoughton police officer. He worked with Robert Devine. So once it was found that it was a Stoughton, had anything to do with the Stoughton police, and especially that Robert Devine was involved in the case, he should have taken himself off the case. But he continued to be on the case. And there, that's a problem that we've seen with Michael Proctor and now and Fanning in Sandra Birchmore's case.
Yeah, so there are huge overlaps. And also, I think if people, if they're not familiar with what we mean by the other two, Sandra Birchmore was enrolled in a police explorers program when she was young, like I said. And there were 3 police officers who were found to have had an inappropriate relationship with her and groomed her prior to the police officer who has now been arrested, Matthew Farwell, taking her virginity when she was only 15. And that's all something that's detailed in this motion for detention. But that separate investigation is something that came out of the town of Stoughton, right? And that program fell into a Stoughton Police Explorers program, just for people who didn't know. So that's something that's, I think, really scary. What you mentioned there is, this is a person who has now been arrested, but it's somebody who had power not only, over her, but over everybody. And he was actually able to groom this girl for, 10 years prior to deciding to end her life.
And here he is in a position of authority, as you say. He's a police officer in Stoughton. And, why shouldn't parents be able to trust, if they have a young person that's interested in one of these programs, whether it's the church or Boy Scouts, whatever. Oh, you're interested in the police and you want to go to the Explorers program. Initially, maybe 10, 15 years ago, people would think, oh, these authority figures are people to trust. As you said, Fanning told you, oh, just trust us. But I don't know, as a former reporter, when I was interviewing police officers about a situation, sometimes the better police officers would pull us aside and say, can we talk off record? And they'd give us stuff off record, and we would not report it because we knew that they knew stuff and that they trusted us. But the police, I distinguished them from police officers who just kind of look you in the eye and say, oh, just trust us, No. If somebody tells you just trust me, I don't trust them. I'm sorry. Yeah. I've got to know them. I got to know what's behind it. If you want me to trust you, earn my trust. And so that's outrageous. I didn't know that you were that close to the case, that you talked to these people, including Fanning, who was apparently in charge of the jury in the Karen Reed case.
Yeah.
But
and he was a witness on Karen Reed's. He was on the witness list, so he shouldn't have ever been near the jury.
No, he shouldn't have. That's a whole different can of worms. I'm sorry I brought it up.
Yeah, that's okay. We mentioned Fanning's bad doings, so we need to put everything out there we can. So
I just can't get away from wondering what's going to happen with, you just mentioned the other officers, William Farwell and Robert Devine, who was actually in charge of the program. Robert Devine was actually in charge of the program. Not so much. There was another officer, I can't remember his name, the animal control officer who allegedly, when Sandra wanted a cat, he allegedly asked her to perform some services. Now, apparently he's out of the case. I don't know, but a lot of people in Massachusetts are wondering what is going to happen and when are we going to hear what the FBI is doing? We don't hear anything. I just Googled it and tried to do a deep dive on it before we came on here. Nothing at all.
I know I can tell you that they are investigating. They're continuing to, talk to witnesses. I do know that. So this isn't over. This doesn't stop with Matthew, as far as I know. But I'm hoping that, they get the other two off the street, because, even it's hard, because I don't know exactly when their abuse of Sandra started. The grooming started, but the physical. But even if it was when she was an adult, they were doing things as somebody in authority that shouldn't have been doing. They were meeting her in cars and hooking up with her. William was introducing her to other men. That's why I've said, he looks like he was trafficking her. He's the one who introduced her to Officer Heel. And there's an army recruiter that he introduced her to. And he was making her send him photos and videos of any man that she was hooking up with. So there's a lot more there than just what Matthew was up to. These men also abused Sandra. And for them to just still be on the street too is concerning. And just now, the pressure is on these two that there might be something down the pike for them. So I'm hoping that the FBI or the AG gets them off the streets soon for everybody's safety.
Yeah, one would hope.
I have a question about the technology. I mean, we all know that through Celebrex and some other tools that are used by the FBI's CAST team, that they can go into our cell phones. I'm looking for my cell phone. They can go into a cell phone and find all these horrible texts that we read about in the motion for detention. But I think you mentioned a little bit ago that one of the other potential subjects, I guess I'll say, persons of interest, was communicating with her through personal messaging. Did you say Facebook or somewhere else?
I believe Facebook Messenger.
Are those messages, are those traceable through some kind of a program that law enforcement has?
Yeah, they can. I assume that they can get a warrant to get into, get Facebook to turn it all over. Facebook would have the IP address, I assume. It was put out by the Stoughton Police Department that he was using this name. So I assume there is some proof for them to make that statement in an internal investigation report. I'm hoping that they have. I mean, we don't know what the FBI knows, but they usually don't bring a case unless they have them. So that might be why they're still working through. But there's also other things that happen with devices. With Sandra's case, to Karen's case, similar is the Nick Garino. Nick Garino couldn't find Gemma Cape's Google search. Well, he also couldn't retrieve Matthew Farwell's information from his phone. But luckily, everything was on Sandra's devices. Sandra had her stuff backed up to her computer. So they were able to get all these text messages from Sandra's devices. And like I said before, why wasn't anything done with the information that they had?
Yeah, because you mentioned Facebook Messenger, and they were actually able to determine all the way back at the beginning who, in terms of Matthew Farwell and Sandra Birchmore, they were able to determine that he added her as a friend on Facebook when she was a child, and that's kind of when this process started. So there's a lot that they can retrieve. I mean, despite him constantly asking her to clear out her messages, that didn't. I mean, I don't know why he thought that was going to work, honestly.
Yeah.
But Caddy has a really good question. She did ask. She was 3 months pregnant. Is that why he did it? Horribly sad. So, in terms of what we now know from the FBI, the charge, and I think Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, the charge that they've brought is that Matthew Farwell killed a witness and or victim of a crime.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because the feds do not have jurisdiction over an M. M is strictly a state charge, and only the state authorities in Massachusetts, only the state authorities can bring that charge. And so when the FBI got involved and learned what they learned, and Mizzy, you know a heck of a lot more than I do about it, they didn't have authority to bring a murder charge, so they brought a civil rights claim under Section 1983 for, and Rosie, you hit it right on the head, for killing a potential victim or witness. So that's how they got around this. Interesting,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah. So that was in terms of his crimes against Sandra when she was a child. So that would be, you know, the grooming, the statutory rape, and all of that.
Right.
They were able to kind of, I suppose that was, you can say, a loophole in terms of the FBI wanting to get involved. But she was threatening to expose a lot, including the pregnancy. So I think that that was a huge part because, I mean, Sandra was groomed from a very young age by this man, and his own wife was pregnant at the time. And I think that that's something that was, because she was in a state of having been groomed by this person for so long, it was almost like she was in a state of like a trauma bond. And I think that around October 5th, when she found out that his wife was pregnant, was when she started to get very stressed about it, and understandably so, because she had been groomed for so long. And that's when she decided she wanted to get pregnant by Matthew Farwell. And she said that if she could have a baby of her own, she wouldn't expose him. But of course, you know, that's, as we now know, that's not how things worked. And I think that in part, he really was trying to cover up the pregnancy. If you guys agree with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think he was trying to cover up the pregnancy and just, you know, he knew that there was a phone call that came from her friend, and I kind of want to explain the phone call a little bit more because it's in the report, but it's not fully explained in the report. Sandra owed her friend some money, and she just wasn't paying her back. And her friend got annoyed with her, and she called the Stoughton Police Department to kind of report it. And they were like, "Ma'am, that's a civil case. We can't do anything about it." And she said, "Oh yeah, well you could tell Matthew Farwell to tell his girlfriend Sandra Birchmore to pay me back." And
really,
that's how it got out. And
this is the call. This is the call you're talking about. That the paperwork only talks about a friend calling Stoughton Police on January 20th.
Yeah.
I did not know.
So that's how, you know.
If you see,
that's how it came out.
If you see in that call, if you see in that call where he confronts Sandra in text and he gets very angry with her, one of the questions he asks is, "Did you steal from this person?" And then she says no. Yeah. But his main concern was that, you know, his crimes had gotten out. And I do believe that by that point they were still crimes, even though she was an adult.
Oh, sure.
It was a culmination of his previous crimes. So I know that there has been a lot of disparaging of the victim as well, which I did want to address with you guys because I'm a little shocked by that.
I think it's just people not fully understanding the complexities of grooming and what somebody, the mental, what somebody goes through, especially somebody who, you know, started when they were 12, 13 years old being groomed and, you know, still being abused into adulthood. And then it's sprouting out not just one abuser, you know, multiple abusers. And it almost turned into a domestic violence kind of situation also, because Sandra looked at Matthew as her boyfriend. So in her mind, this twisted relationship was her boyfriend. And so that's why it kind of turns into almost a direct domestic violence situation, even though it sprouts from grooming, which is even gross to say because they weren't in a relationship. It wasn't a real relationship, but you know, she thought this is what love was. And it went from there. And she, as a child being groomed into adulthood, you have issues that, you know, people don't understand how it can affect you as a person. You know, it can cause depression, anxiety. Sometimes people become alcoholics or drug addicts, become hypersexual, become almost asexual, not even, you know, it can really make a person, like a child, be stunted. You know, Sandra's personality was, she was very smart. She was outgoing and funny and, you know, loving, but she was also very immature. So that's where, like, when I say stunted, it's, she was an adult, but an immature adult. So she didn't understand the complexities of their relationship. And she didn't understand, I think she thought something weird was going on and something was up. And she knew that the violence that was going on in the sex that they were having was, you know, detriment to her health. But I don't know if she fully grasped that she was in a lot of danger. If you look at the later texts, you could tell that she thinks something weird's going on. Like, she mentions to a friend that in her text messages that he's looking all around the apartment. He was like inspecting my closet. Why is he being weird? He brought her ginger ale and she thought it was weird because he never brings her stuff. Just things like that were going on. And so just the complexities of somebody who is groomed, to go back to that, it's, you can't fault them for some of their actions. Yes, she was an adult and we have free will, but she technically didn't, because she was under his thumb and she was also under the other guys' thumbs. And it's like, she had a lot of, I mean, that's a lot of pressure on a young woman to have, not just being abused by one man, but two other men, and also being, you know, introduced to other guys. So it's like, people who want to blame her for what she wanted to do, like, you know, have a baby and kind of put pressure on him, and you can't blame her for that.
No.
Her mind was warped because of these men at such a young age. And people don't, we throw around as a society the words grooming too easily. We don't talk about the real effects that it has on a person's mental state. And Sandra already had some behavior issues as a child. So they're taking a child who has a single mom. She has some behavior issues. Her mom sends her to this program because she thinks it's a good way for her child to learn some discipline. And, you know, she adores police officers and get to be around police officers. She thinks she's sending her to this place to be around people that will never hurt her child, who are the people who are supposed to save children. And those are the ones who groomed her. And so when people want to blame Sandra for her actions, you need to look into the root of the issue. And it's because she was groomed.
Yeah, I reject people that comment on my website and even hint at a blame of Sandra, because you have to understand what you just said about her childhood. She had a very unusual and sad home life. Didn't her mother die at some point? And she
lived with her mother died in 2016, and then her Nana died less than a month later. And then also her aunt, Alice Marie, died in 2019. So and there were other family members. These aren't the only ones who passed away that were in her orbit. So within a short, like five-year period, she had so many family members pass away. And, you know, that puts a lot on a young woman also. I mean, she was still, like I said, she was a child, even though she was, like, say, when she was 18, she had the mental capacity of a child who was emotionally, not mentally. Right. She was mentally smart, but emotionally, she was still young. So, yeah, this young woman had so much grief in her life. Like I said, the three women that she looked up to, besides her aunt Darlene, who's still here, were gone and they were out of her life. So she wanted to have this baby so she could have a family of her own. And that's one of the things that she was 10 weeks. And in 2 weeks, she was on Valentine's Day. She was supposed to announce that she was pregnant, although she was telling everybody who would listen that she was pregnant. She had her friend paint on canvas, you know, something that says like my very own Valentine, and she was going to put that on her like Facebook and all her social media on Valentine's Day, and obviously she wasn't able to because she was killed on the 1st. So she just wanted a family, like, somebody to love her and her to love back, and to be her close, have closeness with her. And
right. So these people in the explorers really became not only authority figures over her, but also kind of like family. I mean, as you just said, she lost her mother, her grandmother, one of the aunts. And so she's obviously a distressed young woman, and she's looking out to these people almost as her family. I can imagine, her, almost, I don't know, I don't know how to say this, but, granting them the physical needs that they wanted to do in order so she could have closeness, because she didn't have any closeness as a family. She didn't have that family surrounding her that she could go to and talk to as a young woman, and express herself, and just ask them questions about life in general. So it's like these explorers became more than just the cops in the program. She almost made them into her family. And just,
they died a little bit later in the story, but still, yes, they became, even with that, even taking that, what you just said, they did become her family and people that she looked up. Matthew was doing things like part of the grooming process. He was helping her with her homework, going to the library with her, ingratiating himself into her life, making him become somebody that she could depend on. That is grooming. That is a man grooming a young woman who doesn't know any better. She thinks, oh, he's helping me. He cares about me. And she doesn't understand that she is just prey to him.
Yeah. She needs closeness in terms of not only a family, but physical closeness. She needs this support network. And so she reaches out to them to be her support network, and they just fully take advantage of that.
Yes.
Yeah, Busby has a really good point. And I think that also this plays into the fact that, these 3 men were police officers as well. It's not just a power imbalance in terms of age, it's in terms of role as well.
Yeah.
So he said she thought they were protecting her instead of harming. And that's a really, when you're dealing with people in law enforcement and they're abusing their power in that way, I think that's a pretty easy mistake to make at her age. That does make sense, and it's something that will be carried through into adulthood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that another issue that people like want to harp on her family, besides just crapping on her, they look down on her family. People don't understand how grooming works, where they ingratiate themselves into like Matthew was doing. So just let's use that example. If you're a single mom and you have a child where you send her to this program, and like you see this officer want to be a mentor and show her how to be better. Oh, you know what? He's going to take my child to help her with her homework. That is amazing. They also groom the families as it goes. Her family had no idea that this was going on. A family, like, people don't understand that a good groomer doesn't show their hand to the family. They make themselves look like they are the most amazing thing your child has ever met. And that's what he did. And that's what the other 2 men did. Sandra idolized these guys. And then they took advantage of that. And her mom even wrote a letter to Robert Devine thanking him, saying, thank you for, giving my daughter structure and being a role model for her. Little did she know that they were the ones that were going to end up hurting her.
Yeah. I mean, she wrote a letter without knowing to her daughter's own abuser. And Robert Devine was the head of the program at the time. I think it's also important to note that the Farwell twins worked under Robert Devine and were participants in the program when they were young. So, and we've spoken about this quite a bit, Mizzy, about them being groomed as groomers. And that's something that's also a really strange phenomena that's kind of come up in this case that I hadn't really thought about before, just in terms of Robert Devine taking these two men kind of, under his wing, and in the end, the three of them participating in this young woman's demise and abuse. Yeah.
I
So
found out a little more about that too. From the young woman that was groomed when at the same, while when Robert Devine took over the program in, I believe, 2002. I didn't know. I thought other officers were helping him. No other officer was helping him. It was his baby. It was him and the Farwell brothers were his deputy and lieutenant. So it's like they were running the program with him. And one of the only other officers that would come in as a guest would be his wife, who is a Quincy police officer. Oh, really? So they already established, he established these two troubled youths because these two guys had behavior issues. They went on to pull over people pretending to be police officers. So they should have never been allowed to become police officers. That's huge. You have two teenagers pretending to be, police officers, and then they become police officers. So he was like gassing them up, like he was letting everybody in the class know, these are my boys, and that kind of made me look at what that victim who was groomed by him back then. And she is in the report. She has spoken out some, so there is documentation about her grooming. She said, that they were his one and his, 2 and 3. He was number one, and they were 2 and 3, and that made them have this power dynamic over other children too.
I'm sorry, I had forgotten that little detail that I read a long time ago. Was it Matthew, or were both of the twins actually going around when they were teenagers pretending they were cops? I think that they, correct me if I'm wrong, they would go around and stop cars and play tough guy to people. Was it just Matthew, or was it both of the kids?
I believe it was both of them.
So how could it was obviously the Stoughton Police Department knew about that, obviously. How could they hire them? How could they hire them if they knew that they had such a, come on, that demonstrates serious problems.
Well, when the deputy chief is saying, I think you should hire these guys, that puts a lot of weight on it. And he was deputy chief at that time, I believe.
So Robert Devine he was demoted at some point, but he was deputy chief of the police department. I think that was before he took over the Explorers program, correct?
Oh no, he became deputy chief when he took over the Explorers program. And the thing about him, he took over the Explorers program while he was an SRO officer. So he was an officer working in the school already around junior high school kids. He was running an after school program for the junior high school kids. And then he was, his police chief at the time made him take over the Explorers program. But, he probably was happy about that because that gave him more access to children.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm quite surprised about the level of access that he did have to children. There was even mention of Matthew Farwell having done one of his police interviews in, was it a school parking lot? He just shouldn't have been there. Obviously they didn't know at the time, but it's shocking to look back on, the level of access to children. It kind of does make you wonder if Sandra was the only one who was affected by all of this.
Well, the thing that's really, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The thing that's really troubling to me is you talk about access to children, and it's shocking how these people we're talking about today took advantage of that access to children. But don't we as a society want our kids to have adults in their lives? I'm thinking about school. I'm thinking about coaches. Don't we want our kids to engage in sporting activities, band activities? You need a band leader. You need somebody to lead the chorus in school. I don't know if the scouting programs exist anymore, but in my life as a kid, they were very important. I mean, there are other community activities, church. And I know that the Catholic Church has kind of had its issues I'm not going to talk about. But a lot of people like me, when we were young, had adults in our lives that we were left with. We were left with these adults in our lives to, do church activities, scouting activities, hiking. So, Mizzy, what, well, I'll ask you both. I mean, what should parents look for? What clues are there that go beyond just like going out and learning how to play an instrument and sing in the chorus or play in the sports team? What clues should parents be looking for? Are there even any? Are these people, as you pointed out before, was Farwell just so clever and so good at it that he would not get caught? What are the clues?
I know. I was actually talking to someone about this last night, and parents, I know you're busy and you have a lot going on, work, and if you have multiple kids, getting them around to different places, but you got to take an active role, like check your kids, tell your kids, I am going to be checking like one of my best friends, she used to tell her kids, your phone is not your phone, I paid for it, it's my phone, I allow you to use it, basically, so I will check your phone whenever I feel like it. And so they know that they can't be doing things in secret, and they need to talk to their kids about somebody touching you, and not in like a sexual kind of way, but even if a coach touches you more than the other girls, or if they even just things like putting that a groomer might put their hand on the small of the back, just so they can test to see how far things will go. They need to just be present too. Sometimes a parent, showing up to practice a little early so that, the coach sees that, I don't know, or staying for the whole practice once in a while. Just so the coach or the, explorers leader or the troop leader knows that, what, this parent is, on their child. I cannot do this to this isn't the one I should be going after. But also talk to your children about, you don't have to make it scary. Just tell them not just the things that we tell kids, like, if somebody touches you here, it's bad. But tell them, if anybody touches your space and it's you feel weird about it, or even if you don't feel weird, tell me so we can have a conversation about it, and I can see if this is something we need to nip in the bud. Because a coach shouldn't be like putting his hand on one of the players' knees unless the child gets hurt and they have to wrap the knee or do something. There are situations, yes, but a coach should never be talking to a child and reach over and put their hand on a child's thigh. A coach should never be like brushing a girl's hair out of their face, or even a boy's hair out of his face, unless there's a situation that arises where they have to help them with something. So parents need to sit and talk to their children, not in a scary way, but so they know that there are people out there, that we always think about the boogeyman under the bed. They don't think it looks like a coach or a police officer or, their teacher. But more times than not, those are the boogeymans under the children's beds, because those are the ones that have access to your children. It's not the weirdo that lives up the street. He might just be, a lonely, eccentric old man. That everybody just thinks he's creepy. But if you sat and talked to him for a minute, he's just lonely and, weird, a little weird. It's eccentric, but he's not out there grooming your children. It's the coaches and it's the people who have access to your children who are the ones that are going to hurt your children. It's so that allowing your children, and even things like, I personally think, a child should not have to hug a relative if they don't feel comfortable. A child needs to know that their body is their body, and they are allowed to tell people no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is even more further complicated now by a digital space as well. If you think about this case and Sandra being added on Facebook by one of these men. I just wanted to highlight this comment by Caddy, who said that you're exactly right. There was a teacher in high school that pushed his boundaries, and nobody really saw it because he was the fun, cool teacher. But looking back, he was definitely over the line. And I think that that's also something, like over the line is an interesting concept as well. If you think about Sandra and Matthew Farwell wanting to coach her, help her with her schoolwork in the library, and that doesn't even seem appropriate, especially since he's not an educator. Or do you think that is not over the line, or what do you think?
From it's like a weird situation because like if he was not a groomer and somebody who was interested in children, and if you anybody in this chat right now who hasn't read this affidavit, I everybody should read this because I think parents need to understand the gravity of what goes on out there. But if he was a nice guy and doing the right thing, there wouldn't have been an issue with him helping her with her homework. But because it's such a weird, like, do we want to stop good people from helping a child that they know needs a little extra help?
No, of course not.
So it's like, and police officers, or, do we want to stop a child from staying after school with a teacher because they'll be alone with the teacher? No, we want teachers to be able to help a child. But parents need to let their children know that there are predators out there, and they need to be able to come to you and let you know that something weird happened. Even if it was, like I said, a coach brushing your hair or putting their hand on your leg and things like that. They need to know that it's okay to come to you. You're not going to get angry with them type deal. It's such a weird dichotomy because it's like, yes, he shouldn't have been doing this, but if he was the good guy, we would want him to help a child that he thinks needs help. So it's like, I don't know how to fully answer that properly.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think maybe also what's complicating that is the status of a police officer as well. I mean, I think if it was just some random person sort of hanging out in the library with a young girl, that might have been looked at differently. So maybe that does show you the extent to which he could hide behind that, which is also equally disturbing. So I suppose it's important to note that people are people first, and then they're police officers or whatever they are second. They all have potential to be a threat, I suppose. This comment from my Louisa dog says, however, many children live in a dysfunctional situation and are not seen or heard by the parents. And I think that is also quite a sad reality as well when it comes to, I mean, and I saw someone in chat earlier say that they're not parent blaming. I think it was Beach Bell. Yeah. But
no,
these things,
not parent blaming at all. It's a whole thing. Like it's like society. It's a societal problem that we need to rethink how we talk about the bad guy.
Yeah.
The bad guy can come in the forms that we've said: coaches, teachers. The boogeyman under the bed isn't necessarily the creep walking down the street or the creep in the van. They can be creeps, but a lot of times they're the people who of authority or people who surround your children. So maybe sitting down with, as a parent, it's just to help parenting, to take Sandra's story and look at it and say, you know what, I need to rethink of how I've talked to my children about some of these problems that could be arise out in the world. Some of the people that we've told them, stranger danger. These weren't strangers, and Sandra was definitely in danger when she got around these men.
I have a question for you, Mizzy, and that is, how closely are you going to be following this? Now, not to sidetrack the conversation to Karen Reed again, but the Karen Reed trial was televised. The Massachusetts state courts allow cameras in the courtroom, and pretty much every second of the trial from opening to closing was on YouTube. We could watch it all. Federal courts do not allow cameras in the courtroom. And when the media people, and I don't want to disparage them because I used to be one of them and I know some of them, but they go in and they might sit through a whole day of trial and they do a report that's 90 seconds. So, you just get a teeny tiny slice of reality. Are you going to go down and cover the hearings, the trial, or is there someone like yourself who you're obviously very knowledgeable about this case? And you're obviously very passionate about the case. You're going to go cover and let us know what happened in these hearings?
I'll go as much as I can. I have some health issues, so I can't be boots on the ground every day, but I definitely would like to sit in there some of the day. I mean, it might be a thing where I can work it out with create a team. Yeah. So like if I can't go, at least one of those people are in the courtroom, taking, I know federal's a little bit different from state. They're very strict about your phones and stuff. Only reporters can have their phones.
Right.
But taking mental notes so they can, put it out there type deal thing, be boots on the ground.
You can take your notebook. You can take a notebook or a steno pad. And a lot of the better TV stations actually have a courtroom artist. Now, I would certainly never expect you to do that, but I mean,
no, they don't want me drawing.
You have an ability to understand and recall detail. So you could always just take notes and then let people know. I mean, I can't do it. I'm still practicing law, and I see these creators who do a fantastic job, much better than I do. I don't know how they do it because I'm still practicing law. I still have cases and clients and judges, yelling at me to get, meet these deadlines. So, it would be good if someone like yourself could cover these things.
I would love to be there, gavel to gavel, but physically I can't. But I think that's something me and my team are going to have to discuss, that maybe we could try to make sure somebody, if we get a group of like 10, 15 people from a crew, say we need at least one of us in the court every day so we can report back and get it out there. So, because like you said, it's not televised. And I think a lot of people understand that federal cases are not televised. They're very strict. So, and in some ways, it could be better than what happened with the Karen Reed, because the performance aspect, when cameras are on, everybody turns into a little bit of a ham. So I'm hoping that that'll take some of that out. And also the salaciousness of this case. It's already like blown up. So I'm hoping maybe if the cameras aren't there, some of that will be cut down. But that might be the only thing that reporters get out there, is that little part. I guess I'm just going to keep going on the shows that I'm on and find a way to get the story out there more. It would be nice that if he would take a deal, but I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if because I mean they could deal with him to take death penalty off the table.
Right. I was thinking the same thing, because if he's convicted, it's automatic life. But also, if they find the aggravating factors, then they can impose the death sentence. So, but isn't it kind of rare? I guess you're the one that should be asking me this question. Isn't it kind of rare that the federal courts actually do impose the death sentence? Especially in a jury in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a fairly liberal state, so I can't see a jury going along with that. I just can't.
I don't know. This might be one of those cases, though, just because she was pregnant, and she was pregnant with a baby. And I know the baby isn't listed in there because technically the baby wasn't a witness, but I think this might be one of those cases that people really say, yeah, you know what, I'm not for the death penalty, but if anybody deserves it, it's somebody that goes and murders a young girl that they groomed from a child, and assaulted and then abused her till her death and murdered her when she was pregnant with my child. You know, I could see people's eyes being like, I don't know, you know what, maybe,
Yeah.
but like you said, it is a very liberal state. But to take that off the table and or give him life with the chance of parole after 40 years type deal. I don't know. You know, he has kids. He's going to want to be able to see his kids, you know, if they're even allowed to go see them. So I don't know. I don't. But see, the thing is, he'd have to turn on his brother, his twin brother. Yeah. So I don't know how that relationship is right now, because, you know, they could even loop these guys into a conspiracy. So
yeah, I can't see the case going to trial. I mean, I'm an attorney and I should be able to think of a defense, but I mean, if you read through the 63, 67 pages of that motion, I'm sure somebody in one of those skyscrapers in Boston right now, as we speak, is coming up with some kind of a defense. But I can't see, based on the facts, I can't see a trial. I just can't. I mean, you file motions to exclude evidence, you file motions in limine, but when the judge doesn't allow those and there's a trial, I can't see it. I just can't. I'm sorry.
And the jury's going to hate him. Like, the jury's just going to sit there and hate him.
Absolutely.
They're going to be angry that he was a cop that did this. They're going to be angry that he did this to this young woman. And plus they're going to, their defense will be to totally disparage this young woman.
And that's not going to work. No.
Yeah. And that's going to make the jury hate him even more. So if I was him, I would say, I'm done, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, in terms of a defense, the only thing that I was thinking when I read that document was that they would jump on the comment about antidepressants, that she did take antidepressants, but that's the thing, it was in her system in the toxicology, so she was taking them. It's not like that can actually be used to point to this suicide, which has, I mean, would you say it's basically been refuted now with the two experts that have said that it's likely homicide because of the hyoid bone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also they both made comment of the necklace.
Yes.
The necklace and the imprint of it on her chest, like her upper, like the imprint of the buckle on her upper chest, and where the buckle was actually over by her, I can't remember if it was the right or the left ear, where it wouldn't have, like, it was like physically impossible for her to have done that to herself. So I think they've got him, you know, they've got him. It's just a matter of what they're willing to do to get the other guys, or they might have enough proof to get the other guys. I don't know. I mean, but they are still, I can tell everybody this, they are still investigating.
The FBI. You know?
Yes.
The FBI, yeah, because I don't think a lot of people have a lot of, and I hate to say this, but I will anyhow. I don't think a lot of people have a lot of faith in the Massachusetts State Police or the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to do anything where they ruled it a homicide, tried to sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And they were ready, willing, and able to just go forward. Michael Morrissey had said that, you know, well, we have no proof of any kind of criminal wrongdoing here. Whether, you know, they pretty much wanted to shut the case. So unless the FBI is doing something, it's, you know, nothing's going to happen to the other two. Interesting, though. Interesting to talk to you, where you have so much background in this case.
I've been living in this case for the last over a year and a half. So it's every day is this case for me, because I'm disabled. And so it's like, I have the time, you know, to read. I've read the reports more than once, you know, and I've talked to family and friends, and I've, you know, stuff that I can do with my capacity with my health issues. I've, you know, like I said, I've lived in this case for the last year and a half plus, and just pumping the information out. So even when I pump it out, I reread whatever I'm clipping or putting out, or it's been my life for the last year and a half. So let's put it that way. That's, you know,
you should write a book. You really should. You should write a book.
I've told the family that I don't want any money. So I don't think that that's in the cards, but
well, just because people like I'm behind the 8 ball here. I've learned so much just talking to you and Rosie and other people, because there's so little in the newspapers. There's really so little. You really have to, like I said before, I kind of did a deep dive trying to get more info from Google. It's just not Google News, and there's just not a lot. They're not.
I recommend the Boston Globe, because they did break the story, I believe, in 2002, and they've been like the last 6 months they've been kind of relentless putting stuff out there, and they have information before we, the public does. I dive into the Boston Globe, because they've put out a lot of information, but it hasn't been like that. It hasn't even broken. You have the weight of the Boston Globe putting out stories, and until the Dr. Bodden came out on June, I believe it was June 25th, and I only know the date because it was a few days before my birthday.
Happy birthday.
It was that's when it really like broke through, and people started taking notice of this story. And I think it broke through at a good time, because it was in the middle of the Karen Reed trial, and the cameras were already there in Canton covering this, the Massachusetts State Police, Michael Morrissey's office, Canton. So this story was like, oh, wait a minute, there's this other crazy story. So, and that's the thing, it's not just Stoughton. Sandra died in Canton.
And
it's like Canton police are part of this, and they haven't even said anything since. They have not released a statement.
A lot of the same officers were involved. A lot of the same officers that were on the scene when John O'Keefe was found on the front lawn, a lot of the same officers responded to Sandra Birchmore's death.
Yeah.
That's not a coincidence.
Officer Sergeant Lank, I think he's a lieutenant now.
Yes.
Sergeant Lank was called to the scene from his initial officers that found her. And Fanning, he was one of the officers that investigated this case. He's on Karen's case, not as much as up front, like and even on Turtle Boy's case, he's part of that case.
Yeah.
There's other cases. It's.
But you're right. The Canton, and you have to say it correctly. It's not Canton like it's spelled. It's Canton. The Canton police and the town itself have been very quiet. They've been very quiet. They haven't wanted to say a lot.
Yeah. And that a girl was murdered in your town, and you are part of putting it as a suicide, and you don't say anything.
And
why? Not even.
As opposed to the Stoughton police chief, who, as Rosie has covered, she came right out and had press conferences and talked about the case and said, "What's going on here? This is one of the worst things I've seen in all the years I've been in law enforcement." So she hasn't been a shrinking violet at all.
No, I mean, I have my issues with how it was handled there, obviously, because it came out of, it was birthed from Stoughton Police Department.
Right.
But they did do the internal report. My issues, they didn't go far enough with the internal report. What is there is really good. It's well written. It reads. It's easy to follow. I wish there weren't so many redactions, but hey, that happens. But I feel like they should have went further. It's like they got up to the line and they stopped with these 3 guys. But who else? Who else in that department knew? Who else hooked up with Sandra? Are there other officers? And they kind of just walked up to that line and said, okay, we're done here. And I think every child who went through that Explorers program should have been interviewed. Whether they, not to say that whether they saw something that happened or they could be a victim. Right. And I know you don't want to traumatize other victims, but, if there were other victims, these men need to be charged for it. We already know there are 2. There's the girl in 2002 and Sandra. So you mean to tell me between 2002 and 2011, there were no other children?
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think that in terms of that investigation in Stoughton, I still struggle to understand what the actual repercussions were of that. I know that the three officers involved weren't officers anymore, but I felt like it was not at all harsh enough for what they found, especially if, I mean, it was during that report it came out that I think it was it William Farwell? They said that there was a possibility that he was trafficking Sandra.
They insinuated it. And he was looking himself up in the, I think it's called the CGIS system. He looked himself up 24 times, and he looked up Sandra multiple times. There is no reason for a police officer to be looking themselves up. They're not supposed to use the system unless it's for something that has to do with, their work. So why was he looking himself up in that system so many times?
Crazy.
And I think that has to do with he was trying to figure out if any reports were made by Sandra, or if anything was coming down the pike, his name was being mentioned in anything. And to me, that goes into what I said, the trafficking. I don't know if there was actual money exchanged, but there were photos and videos exchanged. What was he doing with those? Were they just for him, or was he putting them on the internet? These are questions I'm asking. I don't know, but they were things that he was up to. The making her send him any photos and videos of, her sexual activity.
Yeah, and I do think that when you say not taking it far enough, I do think that's, I mean, in terms of that investigation, it is an unfortunate place to stop. But I mean, I suppose they had their reasons, and we can be thankful that in terms of the explorers investigation, that, that is what it is. It's kind of its own thing, but at least, in terms of better late than never with the investigation into her death, at least something has happened. I mean, I was very surprised. I'm sure you guys were as well, but I think from here we just have to, wait and see. At least it has been established that she didn't kill herself, and that is, in itself, it is, some kind of justice despite what happened. Yeah. I also wanted to just mention quickly that you have a Facebook group that you mentioned in the beginning, Mizzy. How can people find that? What is it called? Do you have details for that so that people can?
We have a Facebook group, but the best way to do it is to go to justiceforsandrabirchmore.com, and that way you can read up on her case, and you can find our Facebook group. And if you don't do Facebook and you do Twitter, I know it's X, but I call it Twitter, you can find my Twitter handle for Sandra Birchmore, and you can learn about the case. So I think that's the best way for people to go. So it's justiceforsandrabirchmore.com. And you can find our different avenues. We do have a standout coming too next Saturday.
And where's that?
It's where Stoughton, Canton, and Sharon all meet. There's a place called Cobb's Corner, and we're doing a standout there. It's our first time being there, so we're excited because there's a lot of traffic there. It's from 12 to 3. And there's a restaurant. If you just Google Cobb's Corner, there's a place called Cobb's Corner Cafe. It's right near, right there. And we'll be right at that corner from 12 to 3. And if you want to come, please come dressed in blue. Right now, as I'm wearing baby blue, that's Sandra's color, but we just want people in blue or white, to just, that was blue is Sandra's favorite color. We do baby blue because blue and the baby, so we do baby blue.
Yeah.
But any blue right now, just come in blue for Sandra. We want to try to get as many people as we can there. There will be press there, so we want to have a good group. And just to also, the more people we have, there's 4 corners, so we could spread people out to all 4 corners if we got enough people.
Okay, good. And if there's any media of that, then we would be happy to distribute it here as well. We can do a show about it too.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, if you want that. Does anybody in chat have any questions? both of the guests' links have been distributed through chat, I think, for Mizzy's channel and both Andrew's channel as well.
I'll put a link. I'll do a link. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see. Let me make sure that those links are findable. Yeah.
Rosie, if you don't mind, what I'll do is I will condense this down into a shorter version, just pull clips out of Missy's conversation, your conversation. I'll do a short version and put it out sometime in the coming week, and then I'll put a link to the information that Mizzy just gave us and that I wrote down.
Yes, and I'll also put a link out for the Facebook group, the website, and everything. I also I was going to highlight some of Suzanne's articles from the blog. So I might do another episode on that, or I'll just post a link to them as well, just so that she also gets highlighted for her work, because she couldn't make it today. But we love Suzanne as well.
Yeah.
All right. So there are the links for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And yeah, chat is showing love. And I think I wanted to keep this around an hour, which we kind of did. So thank you so much for joining. It's been a really, really good conversation. And thank you both so much for highlighting this case. And,
thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, chat, as well. And to my mods. Also, both my mods have channels. That's Busby and True Crime Pantomime. Anybody in chat, please go and subscribe to them too. All right. Thank you so much. Bye,
Have
everyone.
a good one.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye. You too.
Thank you.